everyone. Today is the day when you get to catch up on some of the research I've been doing in regard to our home bases. You may recall me mentioning a power node earlier in our journey. A power node is an intersection of 16 points in time and space that are hypothesized to be created from the residual energy left from the shadows. It is essentially a tesseract, or four-dimensional cube, that covers an entire area. As far as we know, 15 of them exist around the world. Our 12 home bases, the Great Pyramid and the Prophecy, and 2 other places known as the Tower of Lightning and the Colosseum of Warriors. There may be more, but these are ones studied extensively in the files that I have access to. And according to the research, these power nodes are also in magnetic flux, meaning that the magnetic and electrical charge changes depending on the movement and growing or shrinking of the tesseract itself. The constant flux causes ripples in the space-time continuum that aren't always present in the same spot, or at all, depending on the magnetic flux density, which is the calculation of the number of lines of force that passes through a material based on a formula that measures the relation of flux density to the magnetic field. In this case, the vector field is the entire space of the tesseract, the magnitude and direction of all 16 points. There are sometimes gateways to other universes and other times inside these areas due to these changes. And much like traveling at the speed of light can essentially slow time as we perceive it, the power nodes seem to have similar effects on people. Though the doorways are hidden in 4D space and could go unknown to our eye unless we can use tools to measure the charges and look for anomalies, they are very much there, possibly beside you. Right now, 4 test subjects successfully traveled to 3 days in the past in the data in these files, but due to the fluctuations, the files suggest that the tests were ended due to safety concerns of how these fields interacting with our bodies and minds. Of course, I had enough data for me to build my own time scoop with the energy from these power nodes, much like they did in these files. I was able to isolate the gateways and pull specific items through the portal with the use of the magnetic and electrical charge. I came up with the idea to actually cancel out the magnetic field on one end with a positive charge so the object I wanted could naturally just pull itself into the time or space of my choosing. Of course, this also meant that I sometimes accidentally canceled out electrons of the object, turning it into plasma without shape. You are all lucky enough to be the first non-casualties, and I suspect it is due to the prophecy and how you are all somehow tied to the shadows and the ancient relic, the green bowl, in some way. You might all be fixed points in time that must exist at this moment, or I might have perfected my formula. But the data I am collecting suggests that I might have to account for even more changes in the future. The gateways have been extremely active since you arrived, which is what I've been studying for the past several days. But the shadows have also been somewhat limited within the area of each tesseract, which is where you all are, though some places seem to have a larger impact. One such area is at the Misty Forest, where there seems to be a specific element that I have yet to study fully enough in these files. In the future, I will need to tap into 6 specific power nodes to help us break some sort of a seal that seems to be on several other places that we need to go in our journey. What these nodes are depend on our results in this league, for as we know, the shadows seem to be wreaking havoc on this test to try and limit our power. I believe we can use these nodes to help us win this battle. My early calculations show that the power within each node could be isolated and captured into a single point for easier use and a more constant flux density. My math seems to say that the shadows and power nodes repel each other. But while the shadow seems to have limited power within each tesseract because of this, the shadows surround them and seem to be able to change the shape of the power node, which in turn affects our numbers. Watch your step. The activity in the nodes are only increasing each week. But don't worry.
You wouldn't notice being turned into atoms. The world's essence slows, shadows spread from the pyramids to the oceans to the coasts. But behold the test, a smoking gun, a quest passed down for generations. A prophesized hero, the champion. In order to save everyone, thou must drink from the cup. to be a legend. Fight for humanity, reach the goal. It's a quest for the green ball. Green ball.
Welcome everyone. Our first highlighted match of our quest is one between legends in this League of Leagues. But before you battle, let's learn about the home field that the match will take place in, Ghost Mountain. Ghost Mountain was once called Mount Rushmore back in your time, but in your future, it is called Ghost Mountain because of the strange warping of the faces of past leaders. In our folklore, the storms came to the region and instantly changed everything, leading to panic and uncertainty in the region. Devils and Democrats were blamed, but in just a few weeks, no one was left in the region as it became uninhabitable. Based on my research, the shadows came here before even touching the Old Kingdom, perhaps searching for something, or craving for something. This week we highlight some League up-and-comers that come in with momentum from last season. But before we learn of this next battle, let's take a trip to my past to find out about our next home base, Misty Forest. Misty Forest is in a place that seems to be mixed up with an ancient story called Twin Peaks in an old territory known as Washington. Someone by the name of David Lynch spread the word, possibly telling the true story of his childhood, of strange happenings. The strange happenings came, but not until many years after this story was in the public eye. Soon after the shadows took hold of Ghost Mountain, the chaos spread across the land. Misty Forest was one of the odd transformations, which leads me to think it is very important on our quest. Instead of becoming uninhabitable, Misty Forest simply flourished in a constant storm. Impossible for mammals to live, but not impossible for evolution to create new creatures. But with the shadows also come distortion. You see, Misty Forest is home to things in your nightmares. Drawing from some sort of power at this location, the shadows sped up the normal evolution time, and the creatures I speak of made sure no humans were left in a very short period of time. But do not worry, there is one place that in my study seems to be immune to this chaos, a cave behind the great waterfall, which I hope can give us clues in how to fight back against these shadows. But it could also be a trick. So don't let your guard down just yet. Hello. It is once again time to look at two contenders to be worthy enough to be the chosen one. Before we jump into this great battle, we should take a moment to learn about the next place in our journey, Liberty's Watch. Liberty's Watch is named by the strange statue that seems to be looking out towards the vast ocean with the remnants of an ancient city behind. Many believe the statue is actually a gift from a tribe called the Chicago Cubs, but after consulting the ancient files here, I noticed that the statue was supposed to invite the hungry, poor, and wretched to be safe and free. Of course, in your future, the shadows brought with it cold and ice and snow to this region, burying most remnants of the civilization that once lay before it. That safety and freedom was long gone, and no living remnant seemed to remain besides the guard-like Yeti creature that roams the surface. But in my findings, it seems I've stumbled upon a question. Why would the shadows bury this place and then leave a guarding monster? It makes me wonder if there is a hidden power here that could aid us in our journey. Or it could be a way to hunt anyone who is unlucky enough to wind up here. So please, do not go wandering around this area just yet. Hello, everyone. It is now time to look at 2 more teams as some of you leave your initial territories for the first time. But before we learn who has the edge, let's take time to learn about the next place in our journey, Steel Shores. Steel Shores is actually a very large place as it spreads to 2 ancient cities along the bubbling lake. Of course, the lake is bubbling because of the intense surface temperatures caused by the forever fires that plague the cities. Not only is the air unbreathable due to the smoke, but the strangeness of these fires is that they do very little damage to the structures themselves. They just burn and burn. I visited once in a fireproof suit I made, but there didn't seem to be anything of use here. That is until I found the bean. You see, the bean has a secret chamber that can only be accessed by thinking the correct combination. Some sort of ancient bunker from the past with high-tech security that taps into human brainwaves. The bunker itself is actually immune to the shadows because of this, and I was able to get some much-needed rest among the dust. Inside, I also found a clue to why I ended up in the Old Kingdom, so this place definitely seems to be important in one way or another. Leads me to believe that the endless fires are a warning by the shadows to stay away to keep this knowledge hidden away. Later, when I can properly teach you about the nodes of power, you will understand the higher importance of each of our home bases. Hey everyone, this week we get another out-of-division clash with a lot on the line, but we also need to learn more about the next stop in our adventure, the Sea of Angels. The Sea of Angels is an ancient city that seemed to be dry at one point. Now it is mostly below water, and endless storms and the relentless waves make it difficult to reach the old structures by boat. But many of us have actually visited these structures underground, as there are caves that remain dry below everything. You can travel into some of the structures that aren't completely filled with water, and in them we have found many supplies for our colony. I, of course, revisited here after I was exiled in order to get ready for my journey, which has brought me to where I am today. But there was also a strange door in the caves. I was told it was forbidden, something about a demon. I was curious, so I blew it open. Inside was some sort of a bunker and a lot of bones. I noticed that the bunker itself had another closed-off area that was inoperable due to the sea breaching the other side, and that the room I was in was once filled with water. In this room, I found part of a file that somehow survived the water damage. It had a map and directions for the bean I mentioned before. It also spoke of time travel, the first time my interest was piqued in such matters. The bones, however, did scare me. They were not natural, as it was clear they had been spit up from something large. It wasn't long before I discovered one of the other reasons no one takes a boat onto the surface. It is because of the giant octopus that has a taste for human flesh. I resealed the door, understanding that the caves were dry due to this bunker and to help keep anyone safe from the octopus, but I am not sure if I did a good enough job. So don't go swimming around the areas and get to higher ground if you see water coming. So this is a crazy week, with a sophomore in the league going up against a veteran who has plenty of success and lore. But it is the sophomore's home base that we all need to be educated about, as Skyward Peaks is the next stop in our journey. Skyward Peaks doesn't look like much at first, just huge rocks covered in snow that overlook much of the land. And there's an ancient flying machine rusted and frozen near the top of one of the peaks, showing us a glimpse into your time perhaps. But there is more here than the eye can initially see. In fact, there used to be a colony here that ours would trade with. Their lore stated that the underground city was one of the first colonies, and an ancient library helped them move along with a group of elders overseeing it and using it for their religion. But one day a trader never came back, and we stopped trading. But I never forgot the story of this library. Once I was exiled, I marked this as a place of interest, thinking that maybe the colony would take me in. But once I got there, it was evident that something bad had happened. Much of the entrance had collapsed, and there seemed to be melted snow and a new ice patch where water must have filled until being frozen. I was able to get inside, but the library was mostly ash, all burned away. I did find a reference to something called a database, which had ancient studies on the shadows themselves, but that was it. No real answers here. And then I saw it, a flying beast with fire breath as it slumbered deep in the abandoned colony, and I realized that the colony wasn't abandoned, it was attacked. I was able to escape without awaking it, but as I was back down the mountain, I heard its roar as it circled the peaks above me, spitting fire and causing avalanches. There might be more information here that survived, but don't go looking for it yourself. And please, keep quiet. I don't want you to be cooked. Hello again. This week we go to a stop on our journey with an epic rematch of past battles for the ancient relic, with a loss putting the other team in a very bad place. But before we get to any of the storylines in this one, let's take a look at our next stop, Gateway Islands. Gateway Islands is an insane place in that it seems to be a spot where the shadows came to draw in ships from around the land. Ships with high-tech equipment and science labs to try and study what was happening with the weather. High winds and vicious storms absolutely annihilated this place from the start. Many ships were sunk, many gathered data before sinking, but good luck getting to it with the waves that crash on the small landmasses all around here. In our lore, the islands were a supposed lock to the reaching of this land. But if you didn't have the correct key, you would be lost forever in some sort of a demon triangle. In these files, I noticed that many believe the shadows came here as a distraction to lure away protection from other areas, including the Old Kingdom. But based on what I see, I would say that the shadows actually formed the demon's triangle, and that Gateway Islands were just a casualty of this formation. I also found disappearances of other flying and floating machines from the past, and more evidence for my hypothesis is that the data that was transmitted right before the rest was corrupted shows reports of strange machines suddenly appearing, making this original battle the reason for all of the activity throughout time. While I would love to see the old data machines and see if I could recover this data, I wouldn't go swimming around just yet. The Demon's Triangle might have actually spread around the entire Gateway Islands now, and I don't want you to disappear, never to be seen again. Hello. Hope all is well still. This week's match looks to be an interesting battle between legacy members in the league, and the result will be very important for our standings. But before we dive deep into the projections, we have reached the 8th of 12 home bases in our adventure, the Great Superior Eye. In our folklore, the Great Lighthouse amidst the giant swampy lake has existed throughout time, searching for danger and offering warmth, sight, and protection. Great storms have plagued this area, though. Large waves crash on the beach, and the wind and lightning seem to aim at anything that moves, looking to destroy it or wash it away into the depths of the sea. But that is not all there is to fear here. Whatever or whomever the lighthouse seems to be protecting, the weather is just a minor aspect of the danger. Giant lizard people come from the sea in search of blood, and if you somehow are able to successfully hide, do not accidentally catch their eyes. The blackened pupils have been known to drive people to death by fear alone. But there is one thing that excites me about this nightmarish place. The effect the light from the lighthouse has on both the shadow's influence and on the beasts themselves. The closer you get to the lighthouse, the less wind and rain. The closer you get to the light, the less whispers from the sea. And while you might be surrounded by beasts, if hiding inside the lighthouse, they do not enter. Perhaps they can't. I'm not sure how the light still works. An endless beam that surveys the area. I'm not sure what secrets it's protecting or if it's searching for something. But the way the shadows seem to hide from the brightness of the lighthouse, it makes me think this could be some sort of a weapon. For those here, just remember to not stray too far from the light. Ignore the whispers and never look into the eyes of the beasts that will inevitably surround you. Hello again. We get a championship rematch as two teams look to prove themselves as potential chosen ones. But before the details are hashed out, I think it is time to look at this next stop, the Golden Sands. This area is one where many are cautious. So many have disappeared, most likely buried in sand for all of eternity. In the past, there is said to be an ancient city that was home to tricksters and memory stealers. For it is said that everyone acts like what took place there never happened. In our folklore, we believe it is due to the tricksters and memory stealers working together to steal from those poor people. The dust storms were no match for even them, however, as the city was buried with only a few small remnants remaining of what was there. There are underground tunnels here and a strange bunker with radiation warnings. Not sure what that's about, but you are quite safe in the tunnels. At least from the dust storms. If you hear a rumble, it might be best you make sure that part of the tunnel isn't structurally weakened. Because something else swims this ocean of sand. Giant killer worms. These worms can not only hear your footsteps, but they can also read your mind and instill fear. That is probably why most just let the worms swallow them up. They are frozen with insanity of what they are seeing. But there is one interesting tidbit about this place. The bunker has an area guarded by some sort of a laser door. No one knows what's inside. The ones who tried to pass ended up in charred pieces. Perhaps there are important files inside. Perhaps it was a prison. Whatever it is, I'd be careful. Even if you somehow get past the lasers, there's a giant hole in the wall. Big enough for a killer worm. Hello. Two duke it out to become the second team to win two highlighted matchups this season and further cement themselves as contenders to be the chosen one. But let's take a look at the next stop in our adventure first. The Old Kingdom. Of course, the Old Kingdom is where I currently am, though we are not in the same place. But since I have come here and found these ancient files, I have learned much about this ancient kingdom. One, it seemed to once be home to both leaders and imposters, though most couldn't discern who was who, usually leading to chaos once every 4 years. Several secret labs, bunkers, and meeting places exist under the infrastructure seen with the naked eye, and most people didn't even know great battles were won or lost right below their feet, with some of the top minds getting together to solve problems. A great blizzard hit this area, forcing mass evacuations. Some didn't make it, and many of the labs, bunkers, and meeting places seem to have been ambushed by the shadows, with the latest top-secret tapes as more proof of this possibility. However, the reason why I am safely researching and you are all safe is due to the oddly powerful node that exists here. That is why I was able to invent my time scoop, because the energy is so strong that it can be harnessed to power 500 cities for millions of days. This power node also prevents the shadows from getting to certain areas, though not all are protected as well. When I first arrived here, I can tell I wasn't wanted, as an evil force that I couldn't see made me shiver and run. That is how I ended up here. I was trying to survive what felt like a hunt, and I fell through the floor to this area, many levels below the ground surface. I have found out great amounts of information here that has set this whole fight up, which is why the shadows most likely tried to prevent me from getting here. And recently, my time scoop has been acting up, and that I have to continually use more energy from the power nodes to keep the shadows from potentially infiltrating the objects moving back and forth through time and space. Of course, one cannot be sure that the shadows will not find a way to get inside the so-called safety barrier where I am and where you are when in the Old Kingdom. Based on the recent audio tapes, I suspect that people can become puppets of the shadows, which would allow for infiltration in places the shadows might not be able to get to otherwise. So don't let your guard down just yet. Hello again. It is crazy to think that we are now visiting the second to last home base in our adventure. Soon we will have learned about all of the power nodes, and this looks to be a promising matchup in the league as well. But before you learn about the teams involved, let's take a look at the Blue Dunes. The Blue Dunes actually seem to be one of the final power node discoveries in our files. From what I knew before, this place was treacherous to visit. Wind blinds you with blowing sand. Strong waves can pull you into the ocean, never to be seen or heard again. And even if you survive those obstacles, depression is a major concern, with the graveyard of ships and very obvious human skeletal remains strewn about. I hurried through this place on my way to the Old Kingdom, and now I know why. After consulting the files, I have learned that this was the site of one of the last great battles between humans and the shadows after all of the massive evacuations. While the armies seemed to feel confident to put themselves in harm's way, it was just a distraction. Several mentions of this battle are called Operation Time Shield. The shadows seem to have been tricked to allow for the evacuations to complete and for the leaders to continue to work out the real way to save humanity. But the weather worsened in the area quickly, and the shadows' infection spread, causing several world armies to turn on each other. Most of the destruction was actually done by human hands. It is believed that several ships turned on its computer systems before the area was considered a total loss. The Shadow's corruption must have forced people to do this, and it allowed for a major database hack. As far as I can tell, it was after this hack that the leader's plan failed. There isn't much else about these events except the hack forced several evacuation cities to shut off the grid. And it is probably why the remnants of humanity survived underground for all of this time. I am guessing that the Shadow's influence is still very strong at this location around the power node. Be careful and try not to get swallowed up by the sea. Hello again. We've done it, everyone. This is the final home base to discuss of the regular season, and while we will revisit 2 other home bases before the playoffs, this is the last big piece of the puzzle when it comes to the power nodes in our region. And of course, this matchup seems to be one where a chosen one contender can emerge, but we will learn more about that later. First, let's take a look at the Philosopher's Swamp. This is a strange place indeed, because besides the Misty Forest, this is one of the last places known to have trees. While I passed by here, I could only get so close because of the swampiness of the area and the dangers that exist all around. An acidic fog seems to roam like a security guard, instantly creating skeletons that coat the bottom of the muddy waters. Of course, if you escape the fog, there are flesh-eating fish that spew poisons all around. I unfortunately was attacked by one, but luckily had a barrier on my legs to prevent infection, and I escaped unharmed. There's an old hut in the middle of all these dangers, with our lore mentioning an old wise man who inhabits the swamp as a prisoner of the shadows. Not sure who this might be, but he is said to be older than our calendars. Perhaps the wise man knows about the shadows. Perhaps this is just a legend. But whatever the case, the shadows really went through a lot of trouble to prevent anyone from reaching the hut. It isn't far-fetched to think that no one can escape this hut either. Of course, even if you found a way to get past the fog and the fish, don't trust the trees. Unlike the Misty Forest trees that survive due to the strength of the power node, these trees seem strategically placed. A strange black goo drips like sap down the trunks, and it is highly likely that the trees are listening for the shadows.
Please follow the SunDried Tomatoes YouTube channel and watch content including original shows like Legends of the Diamond, random reactions, and Brewing the Facts, the SunDried Tomatoes podcast in video form, and other sports, brewing, or entertainment-related videos. You can like the Facebook page and follow me on Instagram at eclectic_yotso for news updates and just to get to know me better.